Voices International, Freedom in Africa.
Yeah, the CEO of African Voices International, UGANDA. What has been going on in the month of April was transforming global narratives. There are very many discussions. I think we are the first discussion summarizing it all. And of course, I was honored to give to have been given the topic to handle the unification of Africa. Of course, the first question is what I have to, of course, define is what the word unification means. Of course, actually reunification. Of course, the word reunification means coming back together, again, after being separated or in conflict. It's called reunification. And this now is usually used to describe relationship between countries, states, and territories. It's not actually uncommon that two countries will be allied and then find themselves clashing or even going to war against each other. So that is briefly what is called reunification. To add on that, of course, our great father, when we talk about the reunification of Africa, that is, I think the father of democracy and freedom in Africa, that Dr. Kwame Adu said that the total liberation and unification of Africa under all African society government must be the primary objective of all black revolutionaries throughout the world. It is an objective when achieved will bring about the fulfillment of the aspirations of Africans and the people of Africa. It's decent everywhere. It will at the same time advance the triumph of the international society socialist revolution and the own progress toward communism that we every society from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. And that is what Dr. Kwame Nkrumah said a long time. Kwame Nkrumah also went ahead and said Africa must unite. So, without Africa unity, our continent will remain at the mercy of imperialist domination and exploitation. And now the question is now, what type of Africa do we want today? One, of course, we want Africa that is free from conflict and violence. A typical example is what is going on in Sudan. And that is not the type of Africa we want. We want Africa that is free from conflict and violence. We want also Africa that is free from poverty. And we want Africa that is free from corruption. I hope you are getting me well. The question is now, do we have those leaders? Are they agitating to the Africa that is free from violence and conflict? Are they agitating from Africa which is free from corruption? Are they agitating for poverty? So actually, that point that one, the Africans wealth. Number two is you can look at the resources together. Optimal market size. Number four, we are going to look at protectionism. Then we can also look at bargaining power. We want Africa as the unification of Africa. And then we have to look at common market. We can also look at continental unlock countries access to the sea or landlocked states depending on what we read, and then resolving internal conflict and dispute, and that's military defense. And that is actually what, if you remember very well, the late former president of Libya, that's Muammar Gaddafi, was agitating to actually breaking African, the what? 2 million actually, yeah, personnel. And then we are also going to look at affecting the African nationality. I don't know whether there's some clarification you want to get. When we talk about the African wealth, of course, you know, Africa is extremely wealthy, and in fact, the wealthiest land mass on the face of the earth. And that one is to be very, very honest. When you look at the mineral resources, the timbers, everything, actually, Africa is the most wealthiest continent in the world with all those things. And that is why the imperialists, the Western world, the Middle East, they are interested in Africa. So this wealth can be found in abundant mineral resources, and it is huge. And in its huge agricultural potential, African mineral wealth includes a wide variety of huge volume of resources that are critical to the technical and industrial development of humanity. For example, we have gold all over Africa. We have platinum, we have diamond, we have manganese, to mention but a few. Similar figure can be, yeah, exactly. Similar figure could be provided regarding African agricultural potential, which remain largely untapped. Problem of Africans as not untapping 632 million acres of arable land in Africa. Now, of the 6,032,000, you find it's only 1,709,000 acres. Actually, 179 million acres are actually being cultivated, and that is far much less than even 30%. That is number one. In fact, in just 4 countries like the Democratic Republic of Congo, Nigeria, and the Sudan, where nearly 40% of this uncultivated land is located, there is enough agricultural rich land to feed Africa 1 billion population several times and over. However, because the wealth is eventually distributed, showing no relationship to the artificial imperialist imposed division of the continent, this wealth can only benefit the masses of African people when it is shared on the continent-wide basis. That's number one. Now, number two is when we are talking about pooling the investment resources. To invest in large-scale production in both industry, agriculture, a large amount of investment resources is needed. And when Africa unites, it will be able to pool its investment resources to ensure that it will have enough money to invest in the large-scale production of industries, agricultural goods, and services. Once Africa unites, comes back together again, it will no longer have begging the World Bank, begging the International Monetary Fund, and the various donor nations of the world for loans that are tied with the very high interest rate and the exploitative conditions they design to keep Africa in average poverty and dependence. African total foreign reserve held by African Central Bank is $500 billion. That is 510 billion US dollar. Actually, it is US dollar. Separately, the various individual states in Africa will never be able to raise the fund required to invest heavily in any aspect of production, especially in the production of heavy equipment designed to build cars, to build trucks, to build tractors, roads, bridges, trains, airplanes, and other basic items required of the 21st century. Let each African countries invest at least only 5% of foreign reserve in again African infrastructure bond. In short, many Africa units where the wealth and resources of the great continent are amazed in the great Bank of Africa and shared among its people. It is only the alternative for Africa to avoid begging loans with a very high interest from this Western world, which has a very tight string attached to it, so that they come and really exploit us and keep us in poverty. Your Excellency and all the participants, when we look at number 3, I talk about the optimal market size. Only a united, if Africa reunify, or unites itself together to become United Africa or United States of Africa, then it's more than 1 billion population I talked of before, and provide the requisite market size to stimulate large-scale production. In fact, according to the African Union figures, the actual purchasing power of the continent of Africa is actually 1,515 trillion US dollar, which would place it, if we are one nation, as the 11th highest purchasing power country in the world. However, as it is stands, weak and divided with a lot of issues, Africa has been forced to turn its purchasing power. That is actually to say, its various balkanized market over the United States of America and various other industrialized nations of the world. This nation is in turn use the so-called free market opportunity to flood African market with goods, many of which are very dubious quality, below standard, produced by the large-scale factories, plant and farm. These factories, plants and farm, because of the huge size of their market, benefit from what economists call economies of scale. Their goods at a cheaper cost per unit, although they are very substandard. Additionally, these same companies often benefit from their government effort to protect them from international competitions in form of government subsidies. It is actually, as it stands, the potential producers of Africa have little or no incentive to expand production when faced with the tiny market of their individual so-called national states. So sorry, I've been interrupted by calls. Africans in other lands are producing everything from underwear to cellular telephone, from handkerchiefs to refrigerators, from matches to motorcycle, from rice to computers, from chicken to automobile, and exporting them all in Africa. And I'm going to talk this thing briefly about my country, Uganda. Can you imagine? Uganda is called the Pearl of Africa. Uganda receives petroleum rainy forest throughout the year. That's the funny part of it. You can imagine a mere garlic, to be imported from China to garlic to be imported from China to Uganda. Uganda has all the forest with all sorts of tea. By buying after exporting furniture from Dubai, which is a desert land, and that, of course, another area where they are. What that's talking about is actually protectionism. Protectionism. Only a united Africa will be able to protect its market. China protects its industry by keeping its currency. You know the currency of China, of course. It is called the renminbi, something like that. Relatively low, thus ensuring its exports will remain attractive on the global market. The United States provides millions of dollars of subsidies for its farmers, especially in rice, cotton, and maize growers, in order to protect their goods against local competitions in countries around the world. The European Union also does so much the same, with the European poultry farmer being one of the largest beneficiaries, and with the declining Africa poultry farmer being the handset it. Once united, however, Africa will have the power to use tariffs, duties, and quotas, salary increment, and propaganda, and subsidies. And then the bargaining power, when we are talking about the bargaining power, that is the balkanized states of Africa are always at a disadvantage when separately bargaining with the stronger industrialized nation of Europe, Asia, and North America. This is especially when trying to quote foreign direct investment in occasion with Africa, when Africa could not benefit from foreign direct investment. The terms of the agreement will never be to bargain with the stronger industrialized nation under our current balkanized status. We will always lose. However, once Africa is united, it will be in the best position to set terms and agreement between it and any potential foreign investors. Of course, we are also I talked about the common currency. Now let's just take about only in East Africa alone. Just we have only around 7 countries, but we are using different currency. But but one of the best ways to integrate Africa economy and enhance inter-African trade and gain control in setting the prices of African export is through the use of common currency. The United States of America has its own currency, other countries. Therefore, a common African currency will be a common African currency will eliminate the transaction cost customer pays when buying in different currency other than their own, especially for those involved in inter-African trade. Secondly, the piece of goods and services will be more transparent and thus more comparable when there is common units of accounts. But still under the common currency. Number 3, the African common currency will become an international currency, like the euro, like the pound sterling, like the US dollar, of higher value than billions of people. That billions of people inside and outside of Africa will have to acquire it in order to purchase anything made and sold anywhere in Africa. So having a common currency is also one of the ways of really unifying Africa and bringing Africa together. And also, when you see countries like the United States of America, they have continental planning, and that is one thing that we have to borrow if we as Africans need to come together. Only a united Africa can plan continentally. Indeed, the major problem facing Africa do not affect the various states separately, nor can they be solved separately. For example, global warming is having a devastating impact on our major river basins in Africa, including the Nile Congo, the Zambezi River, the Niger, Orange River Basin. They are slowly and in some cases strictly drying up. But how do we solve this problem when each of these major rivers basins interacts with the several African microstates in all of its 5 regions of Africa? Because that is the central, the east, the west, the north. One Africa can't resolve this problem. Yeah, African microstates in all the 5 African regions. Can any one African country solve this problem? Well, ultimately, the entire continent is being affected. And the answer is, of course, no. We need to combine and come together and handle that. In fact, all the major challenges facing Africa require continent-wide solution based on continent-wide scientific planning. For instance, there is absolutely no reason for the people of Africa to be going hungry anywhere on the continent due to drought. With these huge water bodies located throughout the continent, however, with less than 5% of the African land being irrigated. And now you can imagine, out of 100%, it is only 3% of the African land being irrigated. And when you come to, there are some areas where you find the water bodies are there, but the drought is hitting people who are really next to the water body. So something has to be done about that. Our next point is, of course, providing landlocked countries access also to the sea. will be one way of reunifying Africa. A united Africa will allow nearly 20 African countries to acquire the benefit of immediate access to sea, with slightly more than 70% of the Earth's surface covered by the ocean. The benefit of having immediate access to marine life are tremendous. They include minimally food, medicine, raw material, mineral resources, tourism, and protection of geopolitical strategic interests. Our second last reason of unifying Africa is resolving internal conflict and disputes, like what is taking place currently in Sudan. That is meaning the military defense, actually. The balkanization of Africa, the infamous Berlin Conference of 1884 to 1885, not only created small, economically navigable dependent, it is also engaged. It is also engaged and exhibit some of the and also exhibited ethics and small, economically non-viable dependency. And the religious hostilities actually throughout the continent. This long-standing strategy used by during the Berlin Conference, the strategy of divide and rule, was used to perfection throughout Africa, which now has more borders than any other continent in the world on Earth, actually. 166 on Earth. 166. The recipe was simple. Pacifies Africa various ethnic groups, many of whom were historical rivals, and these were all caused by the imperialists to ensure that they divide us and they make us become very weak. And they force them under the same national roof, independent. Then we would be fraught with so many ethnic hostility that achieving national integration, political stability, and economic development would be practically impossible. As a result, you have the entire continent with the interest, actually interstate and interstate conflict. Of course, you can, for example, you see what has been taking place in Central Africa, what has been taking place in Mali, what is going on right now, the Arabs wave. However, only a unified Africa atlas with the full-scale might of the All African Military High Command will be able to resolve this conflict and end this war. For example, now you see what is taking place in Eastern Democratic Republic of Congo, with over 1,000, with over 130 different rebel groups, and yet handling only the M23 as almost African Voice International Uganda. My there are other points that I'm going to bring also. Is, of course, asserting the African personality. Of course, you know, Africa has diverse culture. But despite the cultural diversity that exists in people, there is a far greater degree of cultural unities that exists among the African people. Whenever you find Africa in the world, this is especially obvious in the common African ethos and binds us together as one. Our core values of humanism, collectivism, for example, are demonstrated among the masses everywhere. Even our sense of being, space and time, are fundamentally different from other people in the world. However, because of our status as a dominated people without power to determine our destiny, we are rarely able to have our view of the world expressed, regarded or respected in any meaningful way by the rest of the world. Actually, they look at, for instance, you look at how the former president of the United States of America, Donald, to be of the virus corridor of power, Africa unite or reunify. However, the rest of the world will have to sit up and take notice. We will take our seat on the Security Council of the United Nations and be free to express to the fullest the most silent characteristic of what, and that is what was said by our forefather. That is Dr. Kwame Nkrumah. Of course, now another thing is for Africa to reunify and come together. What type of leadership do we need? Of course, we need strong leaders. I am not saying that we need leaders who overstay in power or who come short and stay few in power and leave. No. Of course, if a leader is staying very long in power for a common purpose and for a common cause and wants to bring the whole African nation, African continent, become United States, actually that is political reunification. I don't see anything bad in that. But the problem we have is, of course, again, when we have those type of leaders, for example, Muammar Gaddafi, when they come with those idea of United States of Africa, to see what the Western world do, what the Western world did, they look for all possible means to create commotion, to create conflict, to create instability, and they begin massacre people until when they kill such people, person with such ideology to bring the Africa together. And that is what we need to fight for. Another thing that we need to talk about, of course, because of our weak position, and we need to stand up as Africa and rise up, is this thing of the Western world imposing homosexuality or same-sex marriage on the continent of Africa. No, well, I'm very, very proud with our president, that is the president of the Republic of Uganda. He stood it. He has withstood the test. Yeah. I think the African continent should rise up and fight this thing of homosexuality or same-sex marriage to the strongest term. Of course, another thing that I wanted to bring in, of course, there are things that can be really sorted out on the table. But of course, because of the too much greed of some of the people who are in power, who want to get everything and they don't want to leave anything as if tomorrow will not come. Also very bad. Most of the African leaders and the people, when they get to power, they want to cling to power as if they were born with the power. And that is also something that is very, very dangerous. And for us to come together, of course, we must fight that thing of over-clinging on power. And then lastly, Your Excellency, I think another thing that we need to fight very seriously, of course, to fight for the common people. Everything that we are doing, the type of education that we give, the type of the health service, anything that we do must benefit the common people. But in most cases, in Africa, it is only the children of the rich. It is the children of the ministers. It is the children of those who have the power, are the ones who are always going to those powerful schools with the powerful education. And these are the very people who, again, they set a bar limiting the children of the poor who cannot afford to reach the point where they can be taken to university on government sponsorship. So what I call upon again in Africa is to offer free, universal university education, regardless, and it must be a quality education, not this education that provides white-collar jobs. It is education which will leave a child to become a job creator, not a job seeker. Thank you so much. That's where I can rest my point at the moment.